Hello there. There you have me. Behind me, the Prince of Darkness, also known as Ozzy Osbourne. Rest in peace now. And he passed away just about 5 days ago. And I just want to spend a snippet of time in honor of this man who actually brought light to darkness, in my view. He made it cool to embrace the darkness, I'll put it that way, as the lead singer of Black Sabbath. His mascara wearing, wild frantics on stage, killer lead vocals, Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne, rest in peace. And I want to spend a little snippet of time honoring his life. Some of this I'm going to read because I want to be accurate, but I really want to also focus on um, some impacts that he had early in life, which I want to normalize in my piece of that. So let's get started. Look at that darkness back there. So he was born John Michael Ozzy Osbourne on December 3rd, 1948, passed away July 22nd, so a couple days ago. And he was actually co-founder of Black Sabbath, and certainly was lead vocalist. Now they fired him several times. They fired him several times due to his drug and alcohol use and abuse. And this is the thing about fame. I would insert this view. The thing about fame, and then sometimes when it becomes so what I would call superpowering, and that drugs and alcohol is often a way to sedate the the level of fame so that you can deal with all of the schedules and the bookings and the advertisements and the showing up and the pub PR and all of that. I know it's very common, but we are human, no matter how badass we are. At times, we need to just find a sense of sedative. And in that environment, the sense of sedative is already embedded. Now, these are my views. It's embedded into the fame of being a famous person. So he did battle with drugs and alcohol, and it did take an impact or have an impact on the band itself, Black Sabbath. And they have fired him several times, such to the point where he once created um, his own solo career with the Blizzard of Oz, in which he released 13 studio albums, and the first seven were certified multi-platinum. So he did quite well on his own. There he was, but he also began to get attacked by the Christian right wing. Now, he was Catholic, but non-practicing Catholic, in which, his level of darkness, they began to challenge publicly due to his popularity. But having said that, he did embark on his solo career, and he did quite well. I do want to insert here as well that he sold more than 100 million albums, including his own solo work. So this is both with Black Sabbath releases and his own work. So, hey, who's to argue with those type of numbers? He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of Black Sabbath in 2006, and then again as a solo artist in 2024. So, how about that? He has two mentions in the Hall of Fame. Now, that is some remarkable acknowledgement. Now, this doesn't also include other awards that he either received or was nominated for over the length of his wonderful career, which was managed by his second wife, Sharon, whom he married in 1982 and until his passing remained married 43 years. Now I will also insert this piece as my view of that. Very rarely in this industry of um, where fame is sought after to be an actor or a singer or performer, a Hollywood person. The industry is unique and different. The industry is somewhat disturbing the closer you get into the embodiment of the industry. But there he had a marriage for 43 years. And I would say that Now, this is opinion and this is observation and this is seeing how the rock and especially the rock and roll and the rap world, I'd say. So I am distinguishing that. Certainly the rock and roll and the rap world, they get buck wild. They get buck wild, and to have a marriage of 43 years is quite unique. And so that tells you something of the man that he is and was in his marriage. To maintain that is phenomenal. So I just want to acknowledge that. Now, his wife, Sharon, I sometimes I feel you just meet your match, you meet your equal, and you could be fire and desire with your equal. And it is more devastating to not be with that person than it is to be on your own. And I think he found his I think he found his love lobster in her. So they had quite the marriage. And her managing him worked out well too. She also introduced him into the reality TV world with an MTV reality show called The Osbournes, which lasted for about 3 years. And it also showcased their two children, Sharon and Ozzy's two children, Kelly and Jack. Now, I do said his second wife. He was married also successfully before Sharon to Thelma Riley for 11 years. Now, here's the ticker tape. Here's the ticker tape. He was married to Sharon. Oh, I'm sorry. He was married to Thelma Riley from 71 to 82, and then he married Sharon in 82. So you do the math, okay? There has to be something going on there. You do the math. But nonetheless, especially nowadays, a 10-year marriage is considered successful. So he was a dude that stuck around. I mean, he was a dude that, despite his life, you stuck with him. I'll put it that way. I'll put it that way. It's the best way I could do it. um, so let's see here. So the Osbournes went on to have a wonderful reality TV show. It gave a lane for his two children with Sharon. He had other children as well from his first marriage with Thelma, but they were not included in this reality TV show. Maybe they made an appearance or so, I don't know, but um, nonetheless, he did well with that. Now, what I want to focus on here, these are what I've shared so far about him at this point. Most you know, are you familiar with, or uh, maybe I introduce pieces to you, and you can find some of this that I'm sharing on his Wikipedia, his Rolling Stone articles, his many articles on MTV, which I'll drop in the description box. Is what I do for any honorariums. What I want to focus on is I have found that since doing this with famous people and honoring their lives, you always find something that is about them that humanizes them, that regulates them, regularizes them, regular humanity of them. And those are the parts that I like to focus on because they are human too, with hearts and feelings and thoughts and minds and impacts by the way people treat them or mistreat them. And that's the part I'd like to focus on at this point. And so, having said that, his early life, at the age of 11, he suffered sexual abuse from school bullies. They would often abuse him both physically and especially sexually. He admitted to attempting suicide multiple times as a teenager because of or about that and the shame that that brought with him or to him. He began to want nothing more to do with school because of this. And he went down a pattern of different types of behaviors by which landed him a short, depending on how you look at short, 6 weeks imprisonment at the age of 17 because he was convicted of robbing a clothing store and he was unable to pay the fine for doing that. So his father, to teach him a lesson, refused to pay it too, and this resulted in him spending 6 weeks in prison. So let me say this about those choices, just that alone. A lot of times our parents can make a decision like that to teach them a lesson because they have not been able to teach you the lesson themselves. And so it is considered a way of tough love. And often it works, but many times it doesn't work. As in this case, Ozzy felt abandoned by his father, and this created a drift that could never seem to reconnect the two men over the course of his life. Ozzy felt punished. He felt abandoned. He felt his dad could have easily have paid the fine. And all these thoughts of how people had taken advantage of him began to percolate in his mind as to how his existence invited people in to take advantage of him. His existence at age 11 invited bullies to sexually abuse him, to physically abuse him. And his acting out in robbing a clothing store, his acting out with drugs and alcohol as a dark uh, image of rock and roll, all of this acting out came as an inner development over time when you don't seem to address that issue that lands in your basement. Now, I've had several past videos on unhealed parts of ourselves, by which the healing belongs to that younger child at the age of 11, but it becomes masqueraded as they grow. 17 when he stole from the clothing store, up to 20s when he got into this Black Sabbath and co-founded it, and then all of the ways that he encountered Hollywood with the drugs and alcohol. And all that did was push down further the actual pain that was the problem, and that was the sexual abuse. Now, I'm not in a sense of therapeutic mode, but this is the commonality I'm sharing. And this is the commonality I'm sharing because, particularly when it happens to men at age 11 being sexually abused, or even by a babysitter, or even by a relative, the shame and the silence sits in the man because they were a child, they were a boy. But older people, older boys, other peers would say, you know, that's not abuse. It is abuse. Or you should embrace that. You know, it's diabolically discerning and diabolically disturbing because it's hard for them to acknowledge it in the first place. So for him to have had these years by which he had shared in interviews with like Rolling Stone and Hollywood Variety, where he actually talked about that, I think probably helped him in three ways: in his first marriage, in his second marriage, and in his relationship with men in general, because it was men who were doing that. It was a man, his father, who didn't bail him out. It was men who were sexually abusing him. So this is scar tissue. This is scar tissue for a man. And if that isn't healed, it's hard for them to fully love another person, even a woman, even if they want to, because it's still there, is what I'm sharing. So, and I won't delve too much more into that because this is just to more honor his life. But I found it at least a strong pause for me when I read and even recalled reading in the past that, and I go, this is a demonstration of his power to step up into that. Although he still had struggles with drug and alcohol to somewhat sedate that. he still had a successful marriage and bore many children from those two marriages. And so for that, he's to be commended. So then let's just see more about his musical career. He continued to he continued to tour with Black Sabbath, although they continued to dismiss him time after time due to his, coming late, missing rehearsals, even missing some concert tour dates due to his, like I said, his alcohol and drug and alcohol use. There was a conflict between him and other band members by which either studio time or recording time was beginning to be a strong fine for him. And at one point, there was a physical fight in a hotel room by which um, a couple of the band members began to have such fights that one was rendered unconscious by being punched in the jaw. So they got pretty wild and crazy and brutal, I would say. But nonetheless, the world of a rock and roller, I'd say that. I'm not going to delve much more into the history of Black Sabbath and his role in the history of Black Sabbath because much of that we do know. But I would say that, a life of a rock and roll star is very unique. And I would say that probably towards the end of his touring years, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Now, it's still not been conveyed as to his actual cause of death. They had mentioned at one report some impact of past COVID, and then how that might impact Parkinson's or how that might impact the heart. But that is still not been publicly made as to his actual cause of death. But nonetheless, the type of lifestyle that we live has a lasting effect as to how we can perhaps invite havoc in our lives later in life, and including some of his children who inherited the strong desire for drug and alcohols in their lives. So, as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, is what they say. He was also diagnosed as dyslexic, Ozzy was. He was diagnosed as dyslexic and had been suffering from ADHD quite badly. And as we know, many of the mental health issues that people suffer with, if another person is unaware of that, they could view that person's behavior or outbursts or treatment of them as them not being a nice person or not because they don't understand that they have a mental health issue they're dealing with. And so sometimes, I guess, years ago, it became at least acceptable to say or to share with the person that, hey, it's just my ADHD. Please forgive me. And that began to empower people to make others understand that the conduct that they're seeing or the behavior that they're witnessing at that time, their mental health issues should be at least some consideration of that. And I think I'm grateful for that, knowing that in a person, because if you don't know that, you do. It's easy for you to say, but this person's just being really kind of not nice. They're not being nice right now. But when you understand, you understand. And that's the graciousness of life, is that we can learn more about people and treat them better based on what we've learned about them. So, having said all that, I think I'll end here and rest in peace, you dark Prince of Darkness. What a musical legacy he left. I'll say this, even if you were not a rock and roller, You knew Ozzy Osbourne, you knew Black Sabbath, you knew certain bands, and you rock and rolled with them. So rock and roll your way right through the gates of heaven. I love it. If you've gotten this far, please click like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Good night.